Thank you everyone for joining. Welcome. You're in the right place here. We're talking about the secret to SaaS growth in 2026. What does that mean? We're talking about self-service, monetization, and the right deployment strategy. And we've got a great panel lined up for us today with many different perspectives and years of experience. So let's jump right in. First, a little bit about Curve. If this is the first time that you're meeting us, we are an embedded analytics and AI platform. We're built specifically for SaaS companies. And the reason why we're here today is because embedded analytics is growing in importance, especially in the technology and SaaS markets. And the reality is that it's no longer just a feature, right? It's a growth strategy. And I think that's why we're seeing the increasing of importance on this technology as it relates to your product, your product's ability to grow and scale and meet your customers' needs. But if we are looking at embedded analytics this year, then there's three key decisions you really have to focus on. And so one of those is how to really deliver a true self-service experience for your customers to be able to personalize the way that they interact with their data. And then how do you turn those analytics into a scalable revenue engine? And then the last one we'll talk about today is really talking about what's the right deployment model. If security is important to you, if you want flexibility and control, what's the right deployment model for your business? And we'll talk about a few of those options, as well as some of the research that we're going to talk about too in that regard. So let's jump into how this is going to work. Kicking us off now. And for each of those three critical decisions, we're going to start with some research. So we're joined today by Howard Dresner. He's the founder and chief research officer at Dresner Advisory Services. He'll be taking some research from a recent study, the 2025 Wisdom of Crowds Embedded Business Intelligence Market Study, that his company turns out every year. So we'll be looking at some of the new recent research there, and then we'll be talking about it and kind of sharing our own experience um, with that information. On our panel today, we have Todd Kinsman. He's product manager at TCP Software. We're also joined by Benjamin Hans, chief operating officer at Ingenious Build, and Natan Cohen, head of customer success here at Curve. And I'm Carrie Pierce. I'm the head of marketing, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So while we are going along the way, feel free to use the chat to ask a question. You can also use the Q&A feature. We'll try to answer most questions at the end because we've left some time to dig into those questions. And if you have any other comments or questions, you want to talk with any of the panelists, feel free to use the chat feature. So without further ado, I'd like to pass it over to Howard, and he'll kick off and share some interesting information.
Thanks, Gary. Welcome, everybody. So I'm super excited about embedded. We'll talk more about the slides that you see in front of you in a moment, but we've been covering embedded for 13 years now. And when Carrie said, it's the 2025 embedded report, we actually publish it at the end of each year. So it's really fresh research. It's not like it's at the beginning of 2025. We collect data on a vast array of topics. We've been doing it for almost 20 years now. We are a bunch of certified data geeks. We love our data. So I want to sort of set the tone and sort of at a high level and then drill down. So one of the things that we ask our community is about what are all the forces that are impacting them right now and their organizations. And if you're a leader of an organization, it's really sort of unprecedented times with all of the external forces that are bearing down on you, whether it's economic and geopolitical in nature. There are so many things that you have to deal with and have to juggle to make sure that your organization is successful. And how are organizations coping with that? Well, on the next slide, you can see we asked organizations about all of the business factors that they're investing in. And this is not just technology, by the way. There's a whole array of things that we've asked them about that they're either investing in or perhaps pulling back investment in. And at the top of the list, you have artificial intelligence. By the way, data and analytics used to be number one for a while. AI is now at the top. And those go hand in glove, right? AI and data analytics, and then digital transformation. All those things are, intrinsically related to each other. Where organizations not investing, and you see some interesting dynamics here, by the way, not investing in business travel. All right, sometimes they have to do some, but not as much as they would have in the past. Discretionary spending. And then look at the dynamic between office space and work at home. There's some organizations continue to invest at work at home. Other organizations are pulling back and investing more in office space. So I guess it depends on your particular experience. But what's notable here is that data and analytics at the top of the list. That's how organizations are coping with all of those pressures that they're feeling from the external environment. All right, let's drill down a little bit now and talk about embedded. Now, embedded is a form of self-service. And like I said, we've been talking about embedded for many years. And I love this chart because you got 13 years worth of data. And you can see that embedded is, in terms of importance, is at its highest point that it's ever been in those 13 years. So it's, you would consider it at the level of very important right now for organizations. Now, self-service is a way to deliver data-driven insights to the organization broadly, which is really important. We talk about a couple of things, or I've been talking about it for many years, something I call information democracy, which is how do we get data-driven insights to everybody in the organization and beyond in the organization to help them be more successful in their particular role. Now, the slide that you see here is really important because what it says, it's a little confusing here, the columns and the bars, but what's important to take away here is that organizations that use um, self-service capabilities tend to be more successful with business intelligence. And what's important about embedded is it is one of the best forms of self-service capabilities because we're including it in the context of another application. And that's one of the challenges with delivering this notion of information democracy is that how do we get it out to the masses without having to do tremendous amounts of training to make them more sufficient or self-sufficient? So self-service and success with BI, those also go hand in hand. All right, next slide. Before we go to the discussion, let's take a look at the future priorities. And I like to talk about this from a couple of perspectives. Now, when we started tracking embedded business intelligence and analytics 13 years ago, the dominant form of embedded was static reports. All right, so you're in an application, you click on a button, you'll get a report. That's not the case anymore. Users and organizations are demanding the full set of functionality that you would expect in any BI or analytical application. So first and foremost, yeah, visualization. They want it to be visual. They want it to be interactive in nature. And as you go down the list, in the top 5, you see some really core self-service capabilities. So the ability to actually modify and create and do new things that perhaps was not intended, not that it wasn't intended, but had not been thought of by the provider. So a lot of freedom within the application that perhaps you wouldn't have seen many years ago. So let me turn it back over to you, Carrie, and start the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Howard. All right, so here we are at our first point here. We're going to be talking about how to deliver a true self-service experience, and I'd love to hear from the panel. Now, for before, tell us a little bit about, your company and what you do. But I'd love to know what were the main drivers for offering self-service at your company, and what are some of the outcomes you're seeing today?
Yeah. So I'm Todd Kinsman, a product manager at TCP Software, and I work on the flagship product Time Plus. And we've been focusing a lot on our reporting and analytics, especially as these experiences become more table stakes for our customers. So that said, one of the ways that we've been focusing on trying to make this more of a true self-service experience is understanding what information the customers need and when they need that to make those operational decisions. Because increasing or decreasing that time to value for them is critical in helping them keep their costs low and making sure that they're happy with what we're providing them. One example for us specifically on the Time Plus side is overtime trends. The sooner that you're able to identify a trend that somebody's going overtime or potentially heading in that direction, you're able to curtail that and help save costs. for that customer specifically. So making sure you're knowing what data, in this instance, kind of that time tracking and what data leads to financial impacts to the customer has been a really helpful way to understand what data helps them self-serve what they need.
Hmm. That's great. What about you, Ben?
Yeah, hey there. So I'm our COO here at Ingenious.Build, which is a construction project management company. If you want to build a large building, our goal is to get different personas throughout that process into one room and to collaborate effectively with each other. To speak specifically about why we chose self-service as an option, I think there are two primary reasons that were driving us towards this. Three. First reason being, as Howard was talking earlier, there's this push towards, in a way, democratization of data. A lot of our competitors offer this, and it's becoming table stakes to be able to offer this, especially to large enterprise customers, to the ability to have access to your own data and to slice and dice and analyze in the way that you want. A second really big advantage for us with self-service is that it offloads some of the engineering on our side to our customers. If customers have very specific reporting needs or analysis needs, then we can say, here you go, here's the data, and do what you want. We're not holding them back, and they can proceed with what they need, and we can spend our time on other things that we have a unique advantage for as software developers. And the third reason that we like self-service is it's just a useful additional offering from a monetization perspective. We can sell this as an add-on and to customers that are willing to pay for it. So it's great just from a marketability perspective as well.
Hmm. Are there any other outcomes that you're seeing today at both of your companies with the ability, you said like offload engineering resources? Where have you been able to, have those resources focus on more innovative projects or?
Yeah, for at Temple Plus, there's often custom reporting requests that takes teams and requirements gathering and back and forth. So by, understanding the data that they're needing and having that in that self-service model, they're able to handle that on their own and free up that team, which often would work on other integration and other data-driven parts of the work that we have. So it does definitely free up some time for us.
It's great.
Yeah, agreed. I think naturally people feel very strongly about how they interact with their data or how their reports look. So that can be a pretty big time suck from an engineering perspective. So enabling the customer to build something to the level that they want is great for the customer. And then, yeah, that allows us to focus on things that are more unique to our company. Creating a report, putting logos here and there, and maybe summarizing data at this level. A lot of different people can do that, but we can focus more on building software related to these construction project workflows and other things that kind of are a unique selling point for our software, I'd say.
It's great. So, Natan, from your perspective, what's the biggest misconception about offering self-service analytics in a SaaS product? And what do you think companies tend to miss when they're evaluating solutions?
Sure. Well, hey, everybody. I'm the head of customer success here at Curve. And I think the biggest misconception at a high level is that it's going to be easy, that it is easy, and it's just about sharing and publishing dashboards. Um, and it's about a lot more than that. And it's not easy, but it doesn't have to be hard if you know what questions you should be thinking about so that you can ask potential vendors what their solutions are. And the vendors should have already thought about and understand those problems. Um, but I think on Todd's answer about, presenting data sets that are meaningful for customers or end users to be able to find the metrics that they're looking for, that's often overlooked. And having end users understand your internal data structures is just not reality. but nor is it a great option to let them navigate the structure and try to find entities that relate to each other. Sometimes less is more, and it's about creating meaningful views that are properly labeled so that customers or end users can find the data they're looking for. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about self-service itself. Once tenant end users start to create content, if you have hundreds of tenants, you'll have thousands of end users, right? And if you have thousands of tenants, you have even more end users. How will you manage that content? And then how will you manage your own content, like template dashboards, um, and promote those effectively from lower environments to higher environments, right? Do you have a vendor or a platform that integrates well with your existing DevOps processes so that that entire process is not an extra process that doesn't fit in with your organization and just makes everything, the maintenance of this solution, just more of a nightmare. So those are just a few things to think about.
Hmm. That's great. Thanks, Natan. Thanks, Ben and Todd. All right, Howard, we're gonna go back to you. We're gonna talk about
Okay.
the next item here.
Yep. Yep. Let's talk about external objectives. So we ask our community about their internal objectives with embedded as well as their external objectives with embedded. And so there are two slides here. Really, what are the goals that organizations have for externally focused embedded business intelligence? And here we slice it by industry. And so what you see here is that, high tech, so folks like all of you, ISVs, evaluated resellers, mostly are looking to embed those capabilities within your product so that you can monetize that, so that you can, sell it to your customer, either making your package or your offering more appealing or as an aftermarket selling opportunity. And of course, it varies by vertical industry, but for high tech, that would be the number one answer. And if we go to the next slide, if we look at the expected business outcomes, and there are two here when you once again looking at it by industry. If we look at it for technology providers, there are two things. And I would say that it looks like increasing customer loyalty is really the top answer, closely followed by generating revenue or being able to charge for those business intelligence or analytics capabilities. And especially in today's market, being able to retain a customer and add more value or more perceived value is really at the top of the list. It's a lot cheaper to keep a customer than to acquire a new customer.
Mhm.
Back to you, Carrie.
Absolutely. Thanks, Howard. And you're right. I mean, companies are looking for opportunities to monetize the features in their product, but it's not necessarily that easy to figure out what's the best way to monetize. And so that introduces, the next panel question. I'd love to hear from Ben and Todd. What does your monetization strategy look like today? Why did you make that approach? And then can you share a couple of KPIs you're tracking?
Sure. So from our perspective, our core monetization strategy is to sell licenses. A customer who buys licenses gets access to all of our base features. And then in addition to this, you can optionally to decide to buy a reporting add-on. And that reporting add-on from a pricing perspective scales based off of the number of users that you have, basically your TCV, total contract value. We decided to have this specific approach for monetization with reporting because we knew that not all of our customers will need it. We service both SMBs and enterprise. Generally, this becomes more of an enterprise, large-scale customer need, finer tuned access to data. So we made it optional. We think that there's a lot of money on the table to get from a sales perspective. So we definitely don't want to just give it away for free too. We want to monetize it. And then we also want to make sure that pricing scales linearly based off of the use as well. So 5 people using this software versus 100, we think we should be able to charge more if there are more users. So that's how we arrived at this kind of scaled approach that's optional. And that's working well for us. As far as specific KPIs, because we're a company that is offering 50 plus different modules, we generally track KPIs around adoption and usage of our platform. And we track how frequently our users engage with particular portfolios of features and what types of actions are they taking. We generally keep those KPIs aggregated and grouped at a high level. We don't really drill down too much specifically at specific module levels because, again, we have a large ecosystem of features right now. So that's one of the big North Stars especially from a product perspective, is just general engagement with our product throughout our platform across different modules. And then we'll have some, let's say, sub KPIs that are tracking time to value for some specific, we call them aha moments, key moments that we want new users to get to as quickly as possible to understand the value and purpose of our product.
Yeah, I love the aha moment. What about you, Todd?
Yeah, I'd say it's similar as far as pricing structure, where we have our licenses, and this would be an add-on for our customers. But when kind of thinking about and understanding how much we're going to charge and pricing for them, we kind of first focused on what the value drivers are for them. And so we have a verticalization strategy where providing some dashboards that are specific to those verticals to try to show, on the sales side, some of that immediate value that you can get if you are in the K-12 market for labor management, or if you're in the some other government industry where you have a lot of budgets that are very tightly managed due to some sort of union contract. Having some very specific KPIs that we can provide for them out of the box is very helpful, which was pretty nice. But then also we are making sure that we're understanding the size of the company, because that does have an impact on the infrastructure costs from our side, to make sure that we're able to still stay in the positive and not take on too much costs because of the size of the data sets that we're trying to provide and manage for our customers through the embedded analytics. And really getting this solution and getting it to folks sooner was a really big win for us, just to be able to have something like this that we can offer and continue to build upon, especially as additional features from Curve have been added. Like the pixel perfect reporting, and now I know that you guys have some AI features coming up as well. It's nice to be able to have that built in there and have a pretty clean path to how we would want to monetize or add additional value for our customers, and maybe not always monetize if it's something that is just a standard that we should be including, but having that path to be able to do that pretty easily, since it is an embedded product.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any particular KPIs that you're tracking as well?
Ours is a lot about adoption and retention, especially in those mid to enterprise size customers.
Okay. Excellent. Natan, you work with, all of our customers, and this is not your first rodeo with embedded analytics. So tell me a little bit, what are some of the other monetization models, excuse me, that you've seen work well?
Yeah, sure. I spend a good amount of my time sometimes working with sales and marketing and even executives with our customers, thinking about how to monetize embedded analytics. And what tends to be common and popular with our SaaS organization customers is a subscription model that ends up being, 3 tiers, and you can call them what you want, like silver, gold, platinum. But they want to know, how can I gate access in embedded analytics? What are the things I should be thinking about, which are not obvious? I think the one that most people think about is gating access to self-service itself. access at the feature level that can be tied to perhaps a tenant end user role. But there are many more ways to gate access. Um, you can gate access based on the number or quantity of assets that you can create, right? And that way you can make a competitive differentiator and say everybody has access to do pretty much everything. That's our competitive differentiator. But if you subscribe to a higher tier like Platinum, you're not limited to maybe 10 dashboards, right? You can create unlimited. Perhaps I think the most valuable way or most or a great way to gate access in a subscription model is understanding that as a SaaS organization, your data is often the most valuable asset you have to give to your customers. So perhaps you should gate access to types of data, or if not types, volume of data, right? We can go back 2 years, we can go back 5 or 10. And if you're at the highest subscription tier, you have access to all of it. Now, marketing and sales, they're going to spend a good amount of time thinking about what tiers you should have and the pricing and what are the gating factors. It's a shame to then take that back to engineering and product and they say, well, that's lovely, but we can't support it, right? There's a process here. How am I going to onboard a customer who's at the platinum tier? What if I onboard them at gold and they later upgrade to platinum? How do I push those assets into their workspace? And what if they downgrade, right? So these are processes that engineering and product will have to support, and it shouldn't be a headache for them to do so. So those are the things that I work with our customers on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you made a really great point about bringing more functions together to set up a monetization model that's not only going to work but also scale because what SaaS company doesn't want to grow, right? I mean, this is why we're in business. So it's very interesting, great perspectives. We're going to hand it back over to Howard. We're going to start talking
Yeah,
about deployment models.
great. Well, thank you. So a couple of slides about deployment models for embedded business intelligence. And this is asking the entire community what their opinion are, what their preferences are regarding deployment. And you can see the top answer is actually being able to deploy this in the vendor's environment. So the vendor that they're actually acquiring the embedded capabilities to actually leverage it within their environment. The second answer is being able to deploy it to their virtual private cloud provider, AWS, et cetera. Or the last least preferable option is be able to deploy it at the customer's data center. So that's the entire community. If we drill down and look at this by vertical on the next slide, you can see some variations here. And you can see that, in fact, high-tech organizations would prefer to be able to deploy it to the organization's virtual private cloud. The second option, which is quite a bit lower than the first option, is being able to support it in the vendor's environment. And of course, the last option, which is really, really small, is deploying it in the organization's data center.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's kick it over to the panel here. So Ben and Todd, what requirements drove your decision around the right deployment model for you? Was it hosted by the analytics vendor or hosted by yourself as the SaaS provider? And why was that important?
Uh, for us, it was one of the big concerns was the security aspect of it, making sure that this really highly sensitive data is managed in a secure way, and that meant that we would be managing it ourselves and keeping it within the rest of the data that we're managing. And I should also say too that having a really strong data foundation as well is a really important part of this. So again, having that cross-functional decision making, especially with like engineering leadership or are having the data architectures involved, just to make sure that you understand not only how to have the right data and how to continue to deploy and keep things up to date in a efficient way. And although that might be something that might be an initial a lot of investment from some of the engineering resources to understand, having that proper foundation and great data modeling within the organization can have multiple benefits outside of just having a way to plug into the embedded analytics, especially in the world of AI that's just driven by your data. So having a wonderful foundation has many benefits and something that I really highly recommend folks investing into right from the start, because you don't want to have to retroactively make a lot of adjustments afterwards, like adding plumbing to your house after you already built it.
Right. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, on our perspective, I think it's something similar. Security, I won't add too much there. We have customers who care a lot about their data and where data is persisted. So being able to have control there helps when it's managed within our ecosystem. And then also from just a functional perspective, if it's hosted within our technical infrastructure, um, we can set up our own automated tests. We can deploy updates when we want. We can make sure that updates are shipped with our analytics software at the same time as when our main production website is updating. So we just generally have more control. We have more insight into our own costs, and let's say spend on a monthly basis from our own cloud infrastructure. So it's more flexibility and control and ability. It definitely comes with, let's say, some more work, but we think it's worth it to be able to have those benefits.
Hmm. Yeah, cost predictability becomes even more important, right? And now that you're monetizing your solution, you kind of
Hmm.
protect those margins.
Hmm.
So, Natan, what are some of the limitations that a SaaS company might run into, right, when they're choosing either the analytics vendors hosting my solution or, we should self-host?
Yeah. This is one of the areas where it's really not obvious why the deployment model matters at all, right? Because if a vendor, hosts your solution, I mean, that can work. And it certainly would work. Um, I would think that if you are a SaaS organization who has built a web application and that's your core intellectual property, right? And that's the user experience that you've spent countless hours designing and curating. Um, you really can't sacrifice that. And it goes beyond embeddability, customization, colors, logos. It goes beyond that. It's really about is the analytics vendor that I've chosen that says that they're integrating with my application, is it still separate, right? Is it really under my control? Are they going to upgrade it? And then my customers are presented with features that I didn't know were coming, and I haven't prepped my support teams and my internal CS teams to support. Um, so, as a SaaS organization, how can you not have that level of control? And when you self-host the platform in your cloud account, it's really not a separate platform. It's part of your platform, and you control it. And this really comes into play when we talk about DevOps processes promoting content from lower environments to higher environments. Do you have a vendor who even acknowledges that you're going to have more than one instance of their platform? You might have a couple test environments, and even production. It's not a monolithic thing in the cloud. It might be one production account, but there are many regions of the world that you might want to deploy to. And there might be a pesky customer who comes along and says, I can't have any of my data even sitting in the same repository. So I need my own instance, right? Well, is that going to be a problem for your vendor? In other words, as I scale my own business and become successful, is my choice of analytics vendor going to become an asset or a liability long term? Um, and then speaking about security, it's nice to know that your data isn't leaving your cloud, right?
Hmm.
And that's certainly another advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you're in an industry that is looking at compliance regulations. Um, I think that we're actually up on time or we're up on the panel, but we do have some questions that came in. So let's dive into them. So the first question No surprise, but no one has talked about AI yet. Where does AI fit into this? I'm going to assume mostly into self-service, potentially monetization, but at least self-service. So I'll toss that one up to the group.
Well, I'll take it first if that's okay. So it's interesting. I was just at a large conference and trade show focused on data and analytics, and everyone was talking about AI and agentic AI and context. That was really big. It was, of course, it was really hard to differentiate one vendor from the next because everyone is talking about that now. But I think it is important to note that agentic AI and generative AI and business intelligence really go hand in hand. And increasingly, organizations do expect that to be one of the paradigms that you offer them. And so I would expect, and when you're looking at embedded, because everyone's talking about context, well, with embedded, you've got so much context for your agents or for generative AI to guide them in answering the question for the end user. So for those users, and it comes down to use case as well. Some users don't want to use generative or agentic AI. Others will use it aggressively. And so it really does come down to the use case. But embedded business intelligence and artificial intelligence, specifically generative and agentic AI, are natural fits. And I would expect that users would find that, at least some number of users would find that to be advantageous.
Mhm.
Yeah, Curve, we're not really afraid of AI. We're leading into it. I think when we look at the areas of our platform um, that AI really would have an impact on, we're always trying to make the process of building dashboards and analytics easier, right? We're not married to a point and click interface. If I can describe what I want to see, and the answer is a chart or a mashup or an entire dashboard, that's great. Um, the value of the platform is not like point and click bar chart, right? It's really the things that I've talked about in terms of content management and data presentation, things that AI just can't do immediately for you. And it's more about making things easier that are just kind of things that naturally need to evolve in terms
Mhm.
of how we create content.
Right, right. And if Gen AI is going to allow the user to interact with that content, that is a form of self-service altogether. So, the next question that came in were what were critical discussion points during the internal evaluation of embedded analytics?
For us, it was mostly time to value, trying to make sure that we were able to find something and find something fast. Especially since we were at that point a rapidly growing company and had acquired other businesses, and we're trying to make sure that we could find some value, especially when the engineering teams were working on so many different things, making sure that we're able to get an analytic solution implemented and as fast as we could.
Thanks, Todd.
Uh, to add there, I think cost is a big one. It- it's crazy how much of a spread there is in terms of cost by different analytic providers. And then also ability to customize.
Mhm.
One of the big things that drew us specifically to Curve is an immense amount of customization from both a data architecture perspective and deployment perspective, as well as just enabling customers to use the software that we provide to them and allow them to make their own adjustments. So I think for us, it's kind of how much control do we have and ability to customize as well as price as well. And I think another one is just, how much of a resource is that the company available to support you in setting up your analytic software as well.
Yeah, that's great. And that actually is a nice lead into the next question. The next question is, what's the level of responsibility for educating your end users for self-service analytics, as everyone's looking at, high adoption?
I'd say that's something that's an ongoing process, especially depending on the size of the company you're looking at. I've noticed the trend for if you're at a more enterprise or that mid-sized company level, you have more fo folks who are just focused on data and analytics and reporting. And
Mhm.
so on-ramping them into a solution with analytics is not hard. In fact, they'll ask for certain things that we might not already have or that we should be considering for enhancements. So they're a really great resource for understanding how we can make some additional customizations, which has been really helpful. Like Ben was saying, because it is much easier to do those customizations with Curve. So I'd say that that would be one of our big drivers.
Mhm.
At Curve, we recognize that there isn't like a monolithic end user persona. Um, there are different types of end users, and you're certainly going to have the folks who are just the viewers, but there are also folks who want to interact and make simple changes, but they just need a very simplified interface that really focuses on the key features that are meaningful to them to customize a dashboard. And then you certainly have the end users who are pretty savvy report developers. They've used BI tools for 2+ decades. They even understand the structure of data and may even be pretty fluent in SQL, right? So then, do you have a way to offer them the power to create buckets and formulas, conditional formatting, and things that they would otherwise expect to see from their experience?
Mhm. Mhm. Ben, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, this one's interesting. I think at the end of the day, if the users don't know what the value proposition is of the feature, then
Mhm.
they won't get the value. So, what is the fastest way and lowest touch way to get that education and awareness? One of the things that we've started to do is to give some out of the box reports, for example, to new customers so they can see what's possible. And then they can modify that. And that's just a very quick way of showing them what the value is. Um, I think it's tough because there's a very large, there's a lot of things you need to know to have uh, like a good approach to building reports. You need to not only understand the business and like what the data means, but you also need to have some background in business intelligence. So I think it's tough to be able to expect to train people on everything. There should be some base expectation of knowledge on the other side. And with that assumption, I think with some basic reports, access to help articles, uh,
Mhm.
hopefully people can kind of get there, and then you can offer the last mile in terms of answering questions or trying to provide some insight on how to do specific things.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'd even add to that too. One important part for us has also been partnering with our sales team and the enablement teams to make sure that they're setting expectations right from the start.
Mhm.
Because exactly what Ben said, it's this entire separate kind of functional, technical area that, engineers might not even be very familiar with. It's the difference between building a car and the highway that the car is working on. And so if we're not setting that expectation correctly from the beginning, it can lead to much more difficult conversations later on in the process.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing I heard someone talk about is personas. And so, understanding that your approach to self-service is not a one size fits all for your customers. So just curious, Ben and Todd, how many different personas do you focus on at your company?
We focus on two, the like an admin type persona and
Mhm.
then a viewer persona who's more operational.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, specifically within reporting, we have two.
Hmm.
And then our generally within our product, we have like ten different personas of specifically within construction.
Hmm. Great. All right. Well, that was a wrap on the questions. I'm just going to jump to the last slide. What do you do next, right? So we'd love for everyone who's attending today, if you've got an interest in embedded analytics and rolling that out this year, it's best to start as soon as possible so you can increase that time to value. We've got some interactive resources on our website. Please check it out, curve.com. You'll see things like an interactive demo center, a developer playground where you can actually try different aspects of our solution for yourself. You can match it to your own UI and get a feel for how that works. We've also got a fun ROI calculator and a vendor scorecard that's interactive as well. But as a thank you for everyone who did attend today, we have a copy of the 2025 Wisdom of Crowds Embedded BI report by Dresner Advisory Services that everyone will get a copy of to really dig into the data. And hey, if you have questions, right, about self-service, how to monetize, how to choose the right deployment model, the things we talked about today, but also just multi-tenant data architecture, right? And whatever solution you're working with now and trying to retrofit, we're willing and ready to have those conversations, whether it's at the business level or digging in, you know, under the hood there. So, on behalf of everyone on the team, I want to thank Todd and Ben for sharing your insights today, and Natan as well. And Howard, thank you for going through the research. We really
Yep.
do appreciate that you could really ground this conversation in data. It's important. And so, once again, thank you all for attending today, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.